Never have I seen the Paladins community so split on a balanced decision. The Feudal Fables update will be bringing us our first significant champion rework in a long while. That rework is going to Moji, who's being moved from the flank to the support class. Some players, namely previous flank Moji mains, are livid about this rework, as their old main has essentially been deleted, while others in the community are ecstatic for this rework and hope it will give Moji some viability. Personally, I think the rework is wonky. It's interesting, and a very different take on a support champion, but I don't see this rework aiding in Moji's viability, as I think she'll still be a niche pick if she goes to live as is. Also, I would have gone about this rework differently. If you've seen my Moji support concept from 2021, you already know what I'm talking about. And if not, I suggest you check it out, as I'll be referencing it in this critique. Before we continue, I just want to preface that I'm going to be doing a second video covering my thoughts on this rework more in depth. The PTS almost always leaves poor first impressions, and when I played, I only had access to Moji's first talent. It is likely that Moji will receive some tweaks before going to live, and I want to see how the champ plays on live and in non-siege matches. This video is going to go over what Moji's changes are, my thoughts on said changes, the pros and cons of the new Moji, comparisons to my support concept which I made back in 2021, and what changes I would make to this new version of Moji. Let's begin with the sweeping list of changes Moji has received for this rework. Her base HP has gone up from 2200 to 2400. The familiar spit's damage has been upped from 300 to 500, and it now deals damage in an 8-unit AoE. But the fire rate has been lowered, going from once every 0.7 seconds to once every 0.85 seconds, and the ability now pierces allies. The secondary fire Familiar Spray has been renamed to Familiar Sparkle. The damage on enemies has been cut in half, going from 30 a tick to 15 a tick, aka going from 375 DPS to 187.5 DPS. The range of Sparkle has gone up from 70 to 75 units. The attack now has a resource bar that takes 4 seconds to deplete and 4 seconds to refill. The biggest change for Sparkle, though, is the ability to heal allies. Now when hitting an ally, they will be healed for 85 a tick, aka 1062.5 heals per second. The passive Magic Mark is no longer built on enemies, but is now built on allies. Hitting Familiar Spit on an ally with full Magic Marks will detonate it, healing all allies in a 75-unit AoE for 500 health up front, and then an additional 450 health over 4 seconds. When properly timing Spit and Sparkle, Moji can achieve around 1600 heals per second. Ability 1, the Magic Barrier, is now the Magic Shield. The old ability would have Moji channel for 2 seconds, and granted her damage and CC immunity. The new ability still has Moji channel for 2 seconds, but now she grants shields to herself and allies within 55 units of her. You generate 100 shields up front, with a further 400 over 2 seconds. Also, the ability can be cancelled now after 0.5 seconds. Ability 2, the Scamper, has had its cooldown lowered from 7 to 4 seconds, and now the ability lasts indefinitely until cancelled. I can't confirm this last change, but I believe the Scamper is slower than what's on live. The ultimate Bon Appetit now grants Moji a 50% heal when she kills the snack. This healing is true healing that ignores caught. Now, let's talk talents. Talent 1 is Spit Shine. This lets Familiar Spit heal allies for 250 without the need of Magic Marks, and also increases ally move speed by 20% for 2 seconds when being healed. Talent 2, Jubilation, removes the self-slow on Sparkle and increases its damage to 35 a tick, aka it now deals 437.5 DPS. Talent 3, Realm Runner, is pretty much the same as the Toot talent. When you use Scamper, you leave a magic dust cloud that applies a 600 heal over 3 seconds to allies who touch it. The only difference with this over Toot is that it seems you can re-enter the cloud to reapply the healing. While interesting on paper, in-game, Moji felt very clunky to play. The health being increased is surprisingly the best change in this rework, and one that should have been added to live a while ago. As for Familiar Spit, the base damage going up is a buff over live, and the AoE being added is a plus 2. The 8-unit AoE is small, but it does allow for a bit of leeway by shooting the floor, and also tagging grouped up foes. 8 units is a smidge shy of Vatu's Shadow Bombs for a reference. But the loss of mark damage on enemies is a massive detriment to this rework. Going on to Spray/Sparkle, the damage is beyond pathetic. You deal 187 DPS. That's just barely more than a Depressor Mine from Kinessa. And this is coming from a close range attack with a measly 4-second uptime that also slows you. Losing stacks on enemies also takes away the minigame of properly timing spits. Now you just hold both buttons and pray to Genos that you kill your target in time. As for the healing, it can feel insane. 1062 heals per second on just Sprinkle alone is some of the highest in the game, only behind Ceres, healing 1100 with Restore Soul. Like Ceres, Moji can also apply this massive healing to multiple allies if they're grouped up. Despite being strong, the resource count really holds Sparkle's potential back. The 4-second uptime at base means you'll be spending a lot of time waiting for Sparkle to refill, which doesn't feel great, especially when compared to Io, who recently had buffs towards Moonlight regeneration. Even if you run the new Symbiotic card capped, it only gives you 1 extra second of Sparkle. That's not really worth a 5-pointer. I also want to quickly touch on Moji providing speed to her allies via the Spitshine talent and the new Nature's Blessing card. Speed boosts from supports are awesome, but due to the self-slow Moji receives when using Sparkle, it is very likely for your allies to run out of range when taking advantage of these boosts. Besides the spray, Moji has her new magic marks. I find this to be the weirdest part of the rework. Detonating the mark applies a burst heal and a heal over time in a 75 unit AoE. That's just a smidge shy of Grover. This part of Moji's kit also acts as Moji's primary way to self-heal. I guess the thought process was that you would be spending most of your time healing your front lines, and as a result your other allies would go ignored. Hence for the creation of this odd AoE heal. Due to being a close-range healer, I think Moji's numbers should be strong. But also due to that fact, I think her self-defense should be strong as well. Damage with this rework takes a massive dip, so staying alive now boils down to your abilities. And, well, this new Magic Shield is garbage when compared to Magic Barrier. To compare, old Magic Barrier. You pop it, and immediately you're damage and CC immune for 2 seconds. New Magic Shield. You pop it, and immediately you get 100 shields with a further 400 over 2 seconds. Moji went from having full damage immunity to 500 disposable shields. Which, keep in mind, you have to channel the ability for the full 2 seconds to gain those shields. During those 2 seconds, you are defenseless, which is a stark contrast with the old Magic Barrier. Granting shields to allies is pretty cool though. I liked prepping them in advance before a team fight, but due to Moji losing her primary defensive cooldown, I'm not in favor of this change, and I think the Magic Shield is the weakest aspect of this rework. Last for basic abilities is Scamper. Base cooldown decrease is very nice, but I'm of a mixed opinion when it comes to the infinite duration. In my opinion, that's unnecessary, and I would have preferred to make the ability faster and usable while airborne. Also, the addition of the infinite duration removes bunny hopping, a tech for Moji, where by cancelling Scamper while holding jump, Moji can carry her momentum forward for a few seconds. As for Bon Appetit, the buff is pretty nice for flank Moji, but this ultimate is not that great for a support. Moji is the healer of the team now, with next to little self-defense. When Bon Appetit comes out, suddenly she's running straight into the team fight, and is unlikely to make it out alive if the enemy focuses her. Because of this, if you want to play safe, you'll end up rarely using the ult. Now that stats and initial thoughts are laid out, let's list support Moji's pros and cons to get a grasp of her power level. On the pro side, Moji has the second highest health pool in the support role at 2,400. Her self-healing via marks, the Rum Runner talent, and the Scurry card are pretty decent. Her healing on allies is insane, and that's also AoE healing. She has utility with shields via Magic Shield and Greater Good, speed boost via Spitshine and Nature's Blessing, and slows via Morning Breath. Her repositioning capability is quite good, almost on the level of Genos, and her ultimate is an Execute. Now for her cons. Her hitbox is still huge, making her vulnerable to enemy poke damage. To maintain heals, Moji has to play within a 75 unit range, which is much smaller than the average 120 unit range that other supports have. At base, Moji has no way to heal allies outside of this range. This requires the Spitshine talent, which doesn't provide high healing on unmarked allies. Tracking allies to apply heals can be tricky, thus lessening the reliability of Moji's healing. Sprinkle has a low base uptime and slows you, making you an easier target. Moji's self-defense is laughable, with how little Familiar Spray does, and with no immediate impact when using Magic Shield. Magic Shield is vulnerable to Wrecker, lessening its value over time. Magic Shield is channeled for 2 seconds, in which Moji can't perform other actions. Scamper is still a channeled movement skill that can be cancelled. Alternatively, Moji can be mowed down by hit scans while using it. The ultimate requires Moji to risk her position to follow up, and does not provide any support benefits. As you can see, in my opinion, Moji has more cons than pros. Of course, all champions should have distinct strengths and weaknesses, but Moji skews towards having more weaknesses. Besides feeling clunky to play with, the biggest issue I take with this rework is that Flank Moji is completely gone. Sure, the Jubilation talent attempts to bring her back, but due to a lack of building magic marks on enemies, that uniqueness Moji had as a flank is gone. And personally, filling marks on allies doesn't hit the same way. This is where I want to quickly skim upon my Moji rework concept from 21. The key differences are that Moji would be able to fill magic marks on both allies and enemies. This also tied into her having identical healing and damage numbers. Familiar Spray acted as a buffer, while Familiar Spit did the heavy lifting, just like live Moji. Spray also did not have a resource or self-slow. Overall healing was lower at the 1200 range, and this was achieved by properly timing Spit and Spray. Damage was lower than Flank Moji, but higher than PTS support Moji. The goal of my concept was to have Moji be an up-close brawl healer. At range, her poke was even worse than live, which leaned into keeping Moji's identity and not alienating her existing player base. I do want to preface that overall I prefer my concept to what we got, as I think it would have been a best of both worlds, making the previous flank mains happy while opening up a unique healer for new players to learn. The only aspect of my Moji concept that I don't like in retrospect is keeping the snack attack talent. Besides that, I still think it's a solid rework. Now with that mentioned, what changes would I make to PTS Moji when going alive? First and most important is buffing spray damage and allowing magic marks to build on enemies. This would bolster Moji's self-defense, as well as please some of the former flank Moji mains. The second is putting the heal of the Spitshine talent into base kit. Without it, Moji has 0 ways to heal her team at range. Even though it's low at 250, the Spitshine talent does alleviate this somewhat. Third, I would remove the self-slow on Sparkle, buff the ammo capacity, or drop it altogether. The self-slow is ridiculous. No other healer is slowed while healing, and being as Moji is huge, that's doubly a detriment. As for the ammo, 4 seconds goes by very quickly. I understand this is meant to act as Moji's cooldown, and is in line with other healers, but unlike other healers, Moji has to put herself in risky positions to heal, while other supports do not. If Familiar Spit healed at base, perhaps the buff to Sparkle Cap wouldn't be necessary. Fourth change is to maintain the current magic barrier. I do think giving allies shields is cool for a support to have, but that shouldn't come at a cost of Moji's self-defense. I personally would make the shields a talent if anything. Fifth is to leave Scamper as is. While cool in concept, more players are upset about the loss of Bunny Hop tech, and the animation for scampering indefinitely looks a little janky. Sixth is to have some supportive buff to Bon Appetit. Possibly have the treat drop a health drop like the current snack attack does, allowing Moji to still heal her team while chasing her prey. The self-healing from executing the snack would probably need to be adjusted though. Seventh, if building stacks on enemies doesn't go to base kit, then it should absolutely go to the new Jubilation talent. The goal on current Moji is to properly time your spits while using spray. With the new Jubilation talent, you just hold right and left click at the same time, which is so boring, and the DPS is much lower than flank Moji. This talent should be the revert Moji to a flank talent. Not necessary, but I also wanted to drop a talent idea in here as well. I'd like to see a talent that looks like this. Magic marks are automatically detonated when they expire. One strategy that the new Moji has is pre-building your magic marks before a fight begins, and prepping marks mid-fight to detonate at the right time. This talent would allow Moji to prep allies before a team fight, and would allow the AoE of the marks to see more benefit by detonating in the distance. I also think this talent would be very interesting to see with damage Moji as well. Probably the numbers would have to be brought down a bit for an auto-detonate, but I think it would be fun, and would act as a good training wheels talent for those new to Moji. I can relate to the flank Moji mains who are upset by this rework. When I played Overwatch, I mained Symmetra, who is a character who had a drastic rework. I've come to prefer the old version, but alas, she's gone. Despite the rework being nearly 6 years ago, players still complain about the old version being booted. I really don't want to see the Moji mains face the same issue of a split player base. Trust me, it only gets worse with time. Anyways, that's where I'm gonna leave this video. Normally, I cover new champions after they've gone to live, and I plan to do the same for Moji. But being as this rework is so drastic, and I've also done a support concept myself, I wanted to drop my thoughts before it went to live. What do you guys think about the upcoming Moji support rework? And what do you think about my suggestions? Let me know down below. Don't forget to clap that like button and laser down that sub button. Snatching the bell is also a great way to stay in the loop. As always, I'm YellowNinja, and peace.